I mean, to some extent, I think this sell-off is going to be an opportunity. I think years from now, it's a generational opportunity. Because it's my view, I get, in terms of all the frustration, noise, the Doge, the distractions, the brand issues, even some of the sales numbers that we've seen in Europe, China, I think it's going to be short-lived. I mean, my view is they have probably from a technology perspective, in terms of autonomous, in terms of the lower cost vehicle, and where I see things over the next 12 to 18 months, I think they're actually going to go in to their biggest part of their technology cycle that they've had, maybe forever, maybe in the last decade.
Does that require Elon to distance himself from the brand or recommit himself to the brand?
Look, I think this is one where I continue to believe the bet for the ages was Musk's bet on Trump. And because of autonomous, deregulatory, and I believe autonomous is worth ultimately $1 trillion alone to the ultimate story. From a brand perspective, look, we think about 10 to 15%, maybe the sales decline is related to some of the brand issues. But based on all of our survey work, we think only about less than 5% of Tesla holders today, so Tesla owners, will ultimately think twice, potentially, from a brand perspective because of Musk. So that's still pretty limited relative to where I view actually the whole growth opportunity.
What about the whole distraction? I mean, he's always had a lot of jobs and a lot of CEO roles, and so this has always been a constant question. But now that he's spending so much time in Washington with the president, working on Doge, does that make you wonder about his running it?
Yeah, look, we went through similar things when it came to Twitter X. I mean, we've gone through other situations as we've talked about. I believe this is something where 3-6 months from now, I think you'll see him a lot more dialed into Tesla in terms of as we go into FSD, as we go into autonomous. I also think, perception's reality, and I get that, but from all the work that we've done talking to people at Tesla, I actually think he is driving a lot of the bigger initiatives at Tesla, despite the view that he's basically 110% into Doge, and that's where all of his time.
Where do you come up with this 5% number? I only ask that in terms of people who might change, because, typically, I think it's fair to say his customer has been sort of center left, let's say. They're environmentally focused. Republicans, perhaps not as much so, at least in certain parts, and so less likely to buy one. I don't know. The Journal today, the story, they cite a lot of people. It's anecdotal, saying, I'm going to give it up at the end of the lease. Where do you come up with 5%?
Yeah, I mean, for us, 1,000 Tesla owners, I mean, it's less than 5%.
So you did a survey of 1,000.
So to me, of 1,000 customers, it's less. And I can also tell you, this is something, as I've talked to others at dealerships, whether it's in Europe, what we've seen even in China, and what I believe we're going to see in the US, I get the brand worth. It is a dark time right now for Tesla bulls. But to me, it is not the time to head for the hills. This is actually the time to double down. The reason we add to the top picks was, I think we look out 6-12 months now. I think this is ultimately, the stock is a double.
Right.
Over the next.
Not on cars, though, right? Is it on Optimus? What's it on?
I think 90% of the value is going to be autonomous and Optimus driven. I think autonomous itself is worth more value than all of Tesla today. And I just think as we've gone through many periods, despite the frustration over the years, that has always been the opportunity. And I just think right now we are going into what could be actually the biggest golden path for Musk and Tesla, despite right now what feels like a white knuckle moment, just bad news after bad news.
You're right. There have been those moments in the past, and the stock has recovered. Dan, we got to keep it a little tight today. It's good to see you.
No,
thanks for coming, Dan Ives.
There's definitely nervousness in terms of tariffs and what that's going to mean. But I actually believe it's really about demand. I mean, demand is more robust when it comes to chips, AI revolution, NVIDIA, than it was 4 months ago.
Was Bush model out of 5% China GDP, as President Xi talked about? Does that diffuse across the Pacific Rim?
Look, I think ultimately a stronger China, more stimulus, is more bullish for Apple. It's more bullish for Tesla in terms of everything we see in China, as just how important those markets are.
Paul, Apple or Tesla first? You make the call.
I'll go Tesla. Tesla's sales fall 76% in Germany in Musk electioneering. That's the Bloomberg headline. We've seen that in other markets as well. As an analyst who's followed this company from day one and you model out demand, how frustrating is it for you to see some of these sales numbers and you're like, we really don't need to see those kinds of sales numbers. What's he doing?
Look, well, first off, I mean, 70% of it is actually really more refreshes inventory year over year. So the numbers sound scary, white knuckle, but the reality is probably about 10 to 15% of what's going on is what I'll call Musk brand deterioration, Doge relate. But no doubt, look, we just continue to view it as the bet for the ages for Musk is on Trump. Deregulatory, autonomous, that continues to be, that's the goal. That's what I think worth $1 trillion.
Have we gotten the market away from making cars? So is it about AI? Is it about autonomous? Is it about robot? Has he been successful in shifting the focus away from making cars?
Look, I think 90% of the value of Tesla going forward is Optimus autonomous rather than actual vehicle.
Really? Wow.
Is there evidence that's a revenue and profit reality for them, or is that technology and innovation?
It's a great
Happy
question.
talk.
It's a good look. FSD today, 15% of Teslas in terms of owners have full self-driving. That gets to 50% numbers.
Is there evidence it will get to 50%?
And I believe
I got people, Dan Ives, in New York canceling Ubers that are Teslas. They don't want to drive in Elon Musk's car. There's people putting black on the label. Germany, as Paul mentions, Europe rather, it's falling off a cliff. Do you see a management away from a distracted Musk going, let's fix this, or does it fester?
I think as wild in the near term, I think it's contained. In other words, we're talking, call it low single digit as a contained issue. Look, is it a risk, especially given what we're seeing in terms of some of the wars in Europe and especially in the US? But it all comes down to they are going to own the autonomous race in the US and I believe ultimately globally. And for Musk, when you view even some of the brand worries and deteriorations, I view it almost as near-term noise relative to the longer-term sort of value in the story.
How about just in terms of time spent? Part of the bullish case for Tesla over the years was it's a bet on Elon Musk, and that is a great bet to make. I don't know what the number is, but it feels like 50, 60, 70, 80% of his time and effort is down in Washington. So does that in and of itself take away from
perception's reality, right? So I think that is also playing into what's happening in the stock because the view is like, he's not dialed in Tesla, he's just focused in DC. But I do believe that that's not true. I do believe he.
Okay, I got 400 back to 273. I got a trading range off COVID that's banded between 200 and 300 to be polite. Do you have is there a Dan Ives price where you pull the cord?
I mean, this thing at these levels, and it gets into the mid 200s.
Right.
I believe it is generational in terms of this type of sell-off where I ultimately see Tesla over the coming year. I think Tesla's going to be a $2 trillion market cap.